What would you do if your professor openly mocked your race in front of the entire class? This black student didn't stay silent, and what he did next left everyone speechless. The lecture hall was packed, the usual hum of whispers and shuffling papers filling the air. The professor, a middle-aged man with a reputation for being blunt, was droning on about historical stereotypes. Then, out of nowhere, he paused, smirked, and said, "Let's be honest, black folks have always been behind, culturally, intellectually, you name it. It's just how it is." The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Students exchanged uneasy glances, some shifting in their seats, others staring at their desks, too uncomfortable to react. The professor chuckled, as if Head just told a harmless joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was a slap in the face to every black student in that room. One student, a young black man sitting in the front row, clenched his fists. His name was Marcus, and Head heard enough. Head dealt with microaggressions before, people assuming he was only there because of affirmative action, or classmates making jokes about his hair or skin. But this was different. This was blatant, unapologetic racism, coming from someone who was supposed to educate, not humiliate. Marcus felt the weight of the room's silence. No one was saying anything. No one was standing up. It was as if everyone was waiting for someone else to do something. But Marcus knew better. He knew that silence was just as damaging as the words themselves. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have stayed quiet, hoping it would just blow over? Or would you have done what Marcus did next? Let me know in the comments. What's the first thing that crossed your mind when you heard what the professor said? The tension in the room was unbearable, and Marcus was about to change everything. But what happened next? Well, that's where things get even more intense. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't storm out. Instead, he stood up slowly, his eyes locked on the professor. The room tensed even more. Everyone could feel something big was about to happen. Marcus took a deep breath and said, "What you just said isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. You're standing in front of a room full of students, people who look up to you, and you're spreading hate. You even realize how much damage words like that can do?" The professor tried to brush it off, laughing nervously. "Oh, come on, it was just a joke." "Lighten up," he said, waving his hand like it was nothing. But Marcus wasn't having it. "A joke?" Marcus shot back, his voice steady but sharp. "Do you know how many times I've heard that excuse? It's just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." But it's not a joke when it's rooted in centuries of oppression. It's not a joke when it makes people feel like they don't belong. And it's definitely not a joke when it comes from someone who's supposed to be teaching us, not tearing us down. The room was electric. Some students nodded along, while others looked down, ashamed they hadn't spoken up first. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "I've worked my entire life to be here. I've dealt with people doubting me, stereotyping me, treating me like I don't deserve to be in this room. And now, you're doing the same thing. But I'm not going to let you. Not today. Not ever." The professor's smirk faded. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Marcus wasn't done. "You want to talk about history? Let's talk about the history of racism. Let's talk about how comments like yours keep that history alive. Let's talk about how it feels to sit in a room full of people who stay silent when someone like you says something like that." The silence was deafening. Every eye in the room was on Marcus, and for the first time, the professor looked uncomfortable. But Marcus wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for everyone who'd ever been made to feel small because of their race. What would you have said to the professor if you were in Marcus' shoes? Let me know in the comments. What's the one thing you would they called him out for? The tension was at its peak, and Marcus was just getting started. But what happened next? That's where things took an even more shocking turn. The professor, now visibly flustered, tried to regain control. Listen, I didn't mean to offend anyone. Let's just move on with the lecture, he said, his voice shaky. But Marcus wasn't backing down. Move on? Marcus said, his tone cutting through the room like a knife. No, we're not moving on. Not until you understand what you just did. You don't get to say something like that and then pretend it never happened. That's not how this works. The professor's face turned red, a mix of anger and embarrassment. You're being disrespectful, he snapped, pointing a finger at Marcus. Sit down, or I'll have you removed from this class. That's when the room erupted. A few students shouted, "Let him speak," while others clapped in support. One girl stood up and said, "He's right. What you said was wrong, and you need to own up to it." The professor looked around, realizing he was losing the room. Marcus took a step forward, his voice calm but powerful. You want to talk about disrespect? Disrespect is standing up here, in a position of power, and using that power to belittle people. Disrespect is pretending your words don't have consequences. Disrespect is telling me to sit down when all I'm doing is standing up for myself and everyone else you've hurt with your ignorance. The professor froze, his mouth hanging open. He had no comeback, no defense. For the first time, he was speechless. Marcus continued, You owe this class an apology. Not just to me, but to every person of color in this room. Because what you said wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. And we deserve better. The room erupted into applause. Even students who had stayed quiet earlier were now clapping, some even standing up in solidarity. The professor, defeated, finally muttered, I apologize. That was inappropriate, and I shouldn't have said it. But Marcus wasn't done. An apology is a start, he said, but it's not enough. You need to do better. We all do. Because racism doesn't go away unless we confront it, every single time. The room was buzzing with energy, a mix of relief and admiration for Marcus' courage. But the story doesn't end here. What do you think the professor should have done differently? Let me know in the comments, what's the one thing you would have demanded from him in that moment? The tension had reached its peak, but the aftermath of this moment would change everything. What Marcus did that day wasn't just about calling out one racist comment, it was about challenging an entire system. His courage didn't just silence a professor, it sparked a conversation that spread far beyond that lecture hall. Students started sharing their own experiences with racism, and the incident even made headlines, forcing the university to address the deeper issues of discrimination on campus. But here's the thing. Marcus didn't do it for fame or recognition. He did it because he knew silence wasn't an option. He did it because someone had to take a stand. And in that moment, he reminded everyone that change doesn't happen when we stay quiet. It happens when we speak up, even when it's hard. This story isn't just about one student or one professor. It's about all of us. It's about the power of standing up for what's right, even when it feels like you're standing alone. So, let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up against something wrong? What did you do? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story. Because the truth is, moments like these don't just define us, they change us. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to start a revolution. If this story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful moments like this. Let's keep the conversation going. Please note this story is a work of fiction only for education and entertainment purposes.